Additionally, as The Guardian reported earlier today, the Mossad, Israel's foreign intelligence agency, ran its own parallel operation, which sought out compromising information on Bensouda and her family members in an apparent attempt to sabotage the ICC's investigation. The agency's former head, Yossi Cohen, personally attempted to enlist Bensouda and manipulate her into complying with Israel's wishes, according to sources familiar with his activities, causing the then prosecutor to fear for her personal safety. Our investigation draws on interviews with more than 24 current and former Israeli intelligence officers and government officials, literally behaving, well, I mean, I guess like behaving like the CIA. I was going to say literally behaving like the mob, but like, you know, this is CIA behavior. I'll repeat, Yossi Cohen is also a rising star in Israeli right-wing politics and is seen as a potential alternative to Bibi. He hasn't even announced his entry into politics, and they've already seen insane polls that show a party led by him would get like 30 seats. Holy shit.
On the 16th of January 2015, within weeks of Palestine joining, Bensouda opened a preliminary examination into what in the legalese of the court was called the situation in Palestine. The following month, two men who had managed to obtain the prosecutor's private address turned up at her home in The Hague. Sources familiar with the incident said the men declined to identify themselves when they arrived, but said they wanted to hand-deliver a letter to Bensouda on behalf of an unknown German woman who wanted to thank her. The envelope contained hundreds of dollars in cash and a note with an Israeli phone number. Sources with knowledge of an ICC review into the incident said that while it was not possible to identify the men, or fully establish their motives, it was concluded that Israel was likely to be signaling to the prosecutor that it knew where she lived. The ICC reported the incident to Dutch authorities and put in place additional security.
It's pretty crazy because what they ended up doing is almost identical to my experience with the Turkish government, where like the first call I got through someone that I know was literally, hey, we'll give you money to write another article, after I read the article on Huffington Post. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that, even though I was broke as fuck and I probably should have taken that money. Let's be real. Then came the threats. Like first it was like, here, take some money and fuck off, or maybe, you know, write something different. Kind of interesting to think that like governments have one speed, or at least maybe governments in that area. I don't know how America does it.
If Fatou Bensouda spoke to any person in the West Bank or Gaza, then that phone call would enter intercept systems, one source said. Another said there was no hesitation internally over spying on the prosecutor, adding, with Bensouda, she's black and African, so who cares?
They said they had no hesitation in spying on Bensouda and said she's black and African, so who cares? There was sensitive information, testimony for potential witnesses. There were specific allegations of Rome Statute crimes to senior officials, including chiefs of the IDF, directors of the Shin Bet, and defense ministers such as Benny Gantz, who, remember, is America's guy. Benny Gantz is supposed to be the liberal on the war cabinet that Americans like, that will inevitably push for when all of this stuff is done so they can go back to the apartheid, liberal Zionism. Years later, after the ICC opened a full investigation, though, Gantz designated Al-Haq and 5 other Palestinian rights groups as terrorist organizations, a label that was rejected by multiple European states and later found by the CIA to be unsupported by evidence. If you remember, the former State Department official went on Christiane Amanpour's broadcast and literally said, Israel told us to prosecute, or Israel told us like these guys were fucking terrorists. Suspiciously, a week after, Adamir is the one I'm talking about. I think Adamir is the one that was talking about the human rights abuses and mass rape happening in Israeli fucking prisons, the Israeli military prisons against Palestinians. As soon as they submitted that report, Israel designated them a terror organization, seized all their fucking computers. Everyone is Hamas. They're literally doing like villain shit.
One of the sources said the Shin Bet even installed Pegasus spyware, developed by the private sector NSO group, on the phones of multiple Palestinian NGO employees, as well as 2 senior Palestinian Authority officials. Keeping tabs on the Palestinian submissions to the ICC's inquiry was viewed as part of the Shin Bet's mandate. But some army officials were concerned that spying on a foreign civilian entity crossed a line, as it had little to do with military operations. It has nothing to do with Hamas. It has nothing to do with stability in the West Bank, one military source said of the ICC surveillance.
The amount of power that the Israeli espionage agencies have, that they literally demonstrate against ICC prosecutors with with total impunity. Like, think about that. This is incredible. if Russia was doing a fucking fraction of this shit, and Russia does plenty wrong, don't get me wrong, but like, if Russia was doing a fraction of this shit, dude, we would nuke them. I don't know what else we would do. We already gave them the mother of all sanctions packages, but like, this is our ally. They are infinitely more malleable. They are infinitely more persuadable, partially because without us, they're nothing.
Legitimate or otherwise. The surveillance of the ICC and Palestinians making the case for prosecutions against Israelis provided the Israeli government with an advantage in a secret back channel it had opened with the prosecutor's office. Israel's meetings with the ICC were highly sensitive. If made public, they had the potential to undermine the government's official position that it did not recognize the court's authority. According to 6 sources familiar with the meetings, they consisted of a delegation of top government lawyers and diplomats who traveled to The Hague. 2 of the sources said the meetings were authorized by Netanyahu. In the beginning it was tense, recalled a former ICC official. We would get into details of specific incidents. We'd say, we're receiving allegations about these attacks, these killings, and they would provide us with information. A person with direct knowledge of Israel's preparation for the back-channel meetings, said officials in the Justice Ministry, were furnished with intelligence that had been gleaned from Israeli surveillance intercepts before delegations arrived at The Hague. The lawyers who dealt with the issue at the Justice Ministry had a big thirst for intelligence information, they said. For the Israelis, the back-channel meetings, while sensitive, presented a unique opportunity to directly present legal arguments challenging the prosecutor's jurisdiction over the Palestinian territories. They also sought to convince the prosecutor that, despite the Israeli military's highly questionable record of investigating wrongdoing in its ranks, it had robust procedures for holding its armed forces to account. This was a critical issue for Israel. A core ICC principle, known as complementarity, prevents the prosecutor from
Yeah, it doesn't matter though. Complementarity doesn't matter because the government is not doing a decent enough job investigating itself or its individuals for the war crimes that it is committing. So complementarity doesn't matter. Israeli surveillance operatives were asked to find out which specific incidents might form part of a future ICC prosecution. Multiple sources said in order to establish Israeli investigative bodies to open investigations retroactively. Yeah, if materials were transferred to the ICC, we had to understand exactly what they were to ensure that the IDF investigated them independently and sufficiently so that they could claim complementarity. So they would do a war crime, and if the ICC was looking into said war crime, they would fake investigate it specifically so they could turn around and say complementarity, complementarity, complementarity. They were surveilling the motherfucking prosecutors to say, hey, we have investigated ourselves on this issue, so you can't actually hit us. Now do you understand how fucking ridiculous it is that we're complaining about Karim Khan? I may be very ignorant, but why did the prosecutor not say anything before? I don't know if you know this, but this prosecutor is no longer a prosecutor with the ICC. And also, literally, I don't know if this article does get to it. I was about to say, the prosecutor was literally tarnished and sanctioned by the American government. Chatter. According to multiple sources, the Mossad obtained a cache of materials, including transcripts of an apparent sting operation against Bensouda's husband. The origins of the material and whether it was genuine remain unclear. However, elements of the information were circulated by Israel among Western diplomatic officials, sources said, in a failed attempt to discredit the chief prosecutor. A person briefed on the campaign said it gained little traction among diplomats and amounted to a desperate attempt to besmirch Bensouda's reputation. They went after her fucking husband. But hey, you know who else they had on board to do the fucking bidding? This dipshit. In March 2020, 3 months after Bensouda referred to the Palestinian case in the pretrial chamber, an Israeli government delegation reportedly held discussions in Washington with a senior U.S. official about a joint Israeli-American struggle against the ICC. This is great because I remember shit like Yossi Cohen being kicked out of the Congo in 2022, and now we find out he was literally just there to harass Bensouda. Also, I can't stress enough how Israeli media conscripted to smear Bensouda back in 2019 and 2021. Hit pieces like this one were published left and right. It's not unlikely they were personally requested by Bibi, as they all came from outlets owned by his billionaire friends. Bensouda is also Muslim. I guarantee Islamophobia played a role in this. And so is Karim Khan. Karim Khan is Muslim too. And that's playing a role again. That's the problem. Karim Khan was supposed to be their guy. Kareem Khan is the guy that they advocated to put on the ICC as a prosecutor, which is weird because neither the United States of America nor Israel are a part of the ICC, which they openly will let you know. Not only are they not a part of the ICC, but America literally has a law in the books to invade the fucking Hague. One Israeli intelligence official